Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villeray.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES television.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. There were two beginnings in the news this week. Campaigning can begin with full knowledge of who's running now that qualifying for the fall elections is complete. And along the Barataria Basin, work began on a $2.9 billion sediment diversion project intended to regenerate lost land. Stay tuned for the results. We will be looking at these stories as well as a couple of marquee elections in Jefferson Parish, plus the search for a police chief in New Orleans, as well as a continuing squabble over the mayor's use of a city-owned department. And as we reach the sometimes troubling period of mid-August, we will have an update on the hurricane season. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Jeremy Alford, editor and publisher of La Politics Weekly and The Tracker, Mark Schlefstein, environmental reporter, The Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate, and Ben Meyer, staff writer, The Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate. And we will go on over to Mark first, because the ground was broken on a major project that many support, but there are others who still oppose it.
That's true. This is a project that is literally decades in the making. Was actually proposed in the 19th century by some people. So there's been a lot of efforts made to what the governor talks about, which is restoring the river to the way it was before, allowing the river to start rebuilding land the way it used to before the levees were built along the Mississippi River's lower end. And what this will do is it's going to, you can have a 2-mile long pathway for water to be pumped into the mid-Barataria, the mid part of the Barataria Basin, and that water will include lots of sediment and nutrients and a lot of fresh water as well. And the positive part of that is the state thinks that over 50 years it will build as much as 21 and maybe as much as 40 square miles of new land in the basin, which would be a significant benefit. The state points out that by that time, in 50 years, that will only represent about 20% of the remaining land in that basin because of continued subsidence and sea level rise. But the project has its problems, and the problems include that it will change the kinds of fish that live in the basin. Right now, it's a mix of fishes and oysters that are able to live in brackish water to saline water, and it will turn it all into fresh water. So the oysters will disappear, and some of the fisheries species will take longer to grow out as they move out of the marshes towards the Gulf of Mexico.
And there's a lot of concern about the dolphins.
Well, right. That's one of the other key issues is that this project, once it's turned on, is expected to have a significant effect on more than 2,000 dolphins that live in 4 separate areas in the basin. As many as 500 of them could be killed in the first year. And by the end of the first 10 years, really they could be virtually extinct. And so those are key issues that are still need to be addressed with this.
Now, and you know, the seafood industry, the fishers, the oystermen, the shrimpers, and those who also are worried about the dolphins have been opposing this project, but it is ongoing. Is there anything that could stop it now? Well,
someone could file a lawsuit, and some court could, attempt to stop it, but that has not happened yet. or at least as of this afternoon, it hasn't happened. The fishers will get some money out of this. There's $360 million of the $2.92 billion is set aside for a bunch of different mitigation projects. Oyster growers will get money that will be provided not to individual oyster growers immediately, but rather to projects that will help grow new oysters in public oyster beds and could eventually be used to help create new oyster beds in new lease areas where older leaseholders might move their crops.
So the state is offering some assistance to
There's
fishermen.
some assistance.
What about for the dolphins? Can anything be done for the dolphins?
Well, that's a much bigger problem. The state is spending a heck of a lot of money on upgrading the response program for dolphins. What happens now is that if a dolphin is in trouble and is spotted, there's a boat or boats that go out to respond and capture the dolphin or pick up its body and dispose of it properly. A lot of money is being put into that program. Some of that money will be used to move dolphins that are sick because of too much fresh water to treat them for that and then potentially bring them back to areas that are not as salty and release them.
So this comes online when? In another
5 years.
5 years?
At least 5 years. You know, it's New Orleans, it's South Louisiana, and weather often causes these kinds of projects to be delayed maybe a year.
So real quick, the channel is going to go across through Highway 23, so a bridge is going to be built there.
So it's the channel will cut across Louisiana 23 and also a major railroad track. So there are temporary bridges that are going to be built immediately for those two. And permanent bridges will be built for both of them over the next 5 years.
And this is right before Myrtle Grove on 23.
It's right above Myrtle Grove and Ironton.
Okay, E?
I just wonder if there's going to be any immediate benefit for the oysters.
For the oysters themselves?
Or do we have to wait for 50 years?
That's unclear. Some of the money is going into doing research on how to make oysters survive in fresher water. So we could see, and we already are seeing, some oyster growth being done on oyster beds that are raised above the bottom near Grand Isle. And there's some money that's set aside for expansion of those programs.
Okay, Mark. Well, thanks a lot. Jeremy, over to you. Qualifying ended this week, so let's take a look. Who's running for governor?
We have a very large field running for governor. I believe more than a dozen candidates qualified. And it's an open seat for governor, so of course it's going to be a huge field. But we do have a slate of about 7 folks who kind of stand above the rest due to their experience and their fundraising. And you see them on the screen right now, starting on the left, that's State Senator Sharon Hewitt of Covington. She's a former Shell executive, one of the few women who is an oil and gas vice president. She was the legislator over the redistricting process. Next to her, I'm not sure, I think that's Jeff Landry.
I think you recognize him.
He's the guy who qualified for office this week and literally said, quote, "Everyone knows who I am," end quote. He is the leader in this race from fundraising and polling to other things in between, and he is the current Attorney General. He is the personality to watch on the Republican side. Next to him is Hunter Lundy. He is the wild card to watch. We have spoken about him on this program in the past. He is an independent trial lawyer from Lake Charles. He has put together both Pentecostals and trial lawyers to donate money to him. I'm not sure anyone else could put that group together, but Hunter Lundy has. Look for him to try to get on the right of Jeff Landry. If anyone can start to take votes off of Jeff Landry and maybe Hunter Lundy, this is a guy talking about Judeo-Christian forms of government. He is also the only candidate, aside from Jeff Landry and Sean Wilson, who's starting to move in the polls. Next to him is Richard Nelson. That's a freshman state representative locally from North Shore. For my money, he is the most interesting candidate. He has an intelligence background. He's been struck by lightning, and he's literally running against Huey P. Long and that legacy. Next up on this next screen, we have a few other candidates as well. Treasurer John Schroeder is seeking not has chosen not to seek re-election and is running for governor. Most interesting thing about him right now, he is going around and saying that he will open an office in Shreveport and will work there as governor time to time. So there's no North Louisiana candidate in this race, but it is now John Schroeder, I believe. Stephen Wagensback, former president of the Business Chamber, he qualified to much fanfare. A lot of folks are looking to him as kind of the Republican who could step up and try to catch Jeff Landry, but that looks unlikely based on the polling we see today because of this final gentleman, Shawn Wilson, former transportation secretary. He is the only major marketable Democrat running in this race. And look, if it was held today, that runoff would be between Jeff Landry and Shawn Wilson. But there's a lot of politics to play between now and Election Day.
Yeah, and primary October?
It's in October, and a runoff as needed in November.
So we're getting close. This is really going to be 2 months of serious campaigning. What do you think will happen to maybe shake it up?
A lot would have to happen. I think Jeff Landry has quickly become one of Louisiana's most talented politicians, maybe the most talented we've seen since Edwin Edwards. He has outworked everyone in this race. He has outsmarted everyone in this race. He has done things no one has thought to do, like getting an early endorsement from the Louisiana Republican Party in order to take over their bank account. So we're going to have to see. I think if something's going to happen, the opponents will have to take it to Jeff Landry, and they're going to have to hit hard. And I'm sure they're aware that Jeff Landry can hit hard as well.
I think that getting the early Republican endorsement was really a critical moment because that took all the other Republicans out of play. It took that whole issue out of play. He was criticized for it. The Republicans were criticized. It was a good thing. Another thing I thought was a good an important moment was when Billy Nungasser said he wasn't going to run for governor. And so that kind of opened up the field.
Yeah, that was one of the big moves.
And then the other thing, he said a big TV commercial campaign, not just on TV, but on the internet. I mean, he's all over the internet. And the voice is his wife, who does the narration. And I think she's a very strong force in that.
She is at his side quite a bit these days. And I think we're going to continue to see a whole lot of her. One big name we have not talked about who may or may not be a factor in this race is John Kennedy. He said early on, he told me in an interview in January, he told me that that he didn't think the ultimate winner had announced yet. That was before Stephen Wagensback had announced. And he didn't sound too enthusiastic about the candidacy of Jeff Landry. So he's a pretty popular politician. Yeah. If he wanted to get involved, he could make a difference.
Where does Garrett Graves sit in all this?
So Garrett Graves has been traveling and doing things with Stephen Wagensback. They're longtime friends. I believe Congressman Julia Letlow, too, is someone that we can call a very close friend, Stephen Wagensback.
Okay, so the race is on for real now, all right? In the next, 2 months, we go to the polls in October. Yes, it certainly is. And it's always fun to hear you talk about it. Thanks a lot, Jeremy. Okay, Ben, over to you. City Council did something yesterday that has made the mayor angry in the city of New Orleans.
Well, whether or not she's angry or not, it's not for me to say, but she has certainly ensured that we will continue to talk about this issue, which we've been talking about for a better part of a year, ongoing. This is about the Pentalba apartment, which the city owns. Last year, Fox 8 documented her coming and going into the apartment, suggesting that maybe she was using it as a residence. City Council then took an action trying to it was sort of a half measure that banned overnight stays for mayors at this apartment. Mayors have typically used this apartment for visiting dignitaries and other kinds of events, meetings, and things of that nature.
And have for decades.
Have for decades, so that's not unusual. Living there seemed to cross cross some kind of a line wasn't written down anywhere in any rules. So the city council came up with this measure of saying, well, okay, no overnight stays. And I must say, Councilman Morrell said at the time, wait for, at some point we're going to come back and be doing this again. Because you have not banned, first of all, overnight stays doesn't mean anything. Second of all, you never banned overnight parties. Fast forward to Essence Festival that weekend, and once again, Fox 8 catches the mayor coming and going from the apartment late at night, leaving in the morning. Whether or not that's an overnight stay, I don't know, but it blew up again, and this time the council took the full measure and wants to return it to market now and mayoral privilege altogether.
Is that something that the IG, the Inspector General, also had recommended, that it go back into commerce?
Yes, the IG certainly issued a firm recommendation saying we should return this to Commerce. It would generate approximately $40,000 a year, according to the IG. And Mayor quickly after the vote on Thursday said that she's going to veto it. So this will continue to be a preoccupation and somewhat of a sideshow when the city has so many other challenges to focus on.
The full council did not vote on this because one member was missing.
That's right, and this is going to be interesting. So the vote was 4-2. It takes 5 votes to override a veto. Councilman King was absent. So his position on this, which I don't think anyone could foretell, I mean, he's not exactly predictable on this, will make a big difference.
And so the vote came down how among the council members who were there
So the
yesterday?
2 against were Councilman Green and Councilman Thomas, and the 4 in favor were the 2 at-larges, Moreno and Morrell, Jeruso and Harris.
So, I mean, it stands to reason in terms of a veto override, probably there would be 2 at least in the mayor's corner with that.
She's got 2 who voted with her, and then where Councilman King comes, we'll have to see.
Okay, all righty, Ben. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Okay, E, over to you, because there's really some red-hot races over there in Jefferson Parish.
Yeah, and in some races that nothing's happening because it's the major races. None of the major incumbents have competition, including parish president and sheriff. But the real point of interest is going to be the at-large campaign. You know, both New Orleans and Jefferson Parish have 7-member councils. In both of the councils are 5 districts and 2 at-large. The difference is the way that the 2 at-larges are drawn up, and that's influenced by the river. In Jefferson Parish, the river more evenly divides the parish than it does in Orleans Parish. And so back in the days when they were drawing up the parish, getting away from the old police jury system, okay, they had 5 districts, and they used to have what they called the East Bank at large and the West Bank at large. And people said, well, no, that's not really quite fair. There's more people in the East Bank than the West Bank, but not a whole lot more, but just enough that you had to do it. And so now it's called Division A and Division B, and some of the people in the West Bank vote, people on the other side. But those are the 2 critical elections, and what defines both of these elections is that both of them have incumbent at-large members who are running again. However, they have people within the district members within their area who are term limited, and so they have the occasion of term limited. And so you see something like in this race, this is District A, Jennifer Van Vranken, who's the district council member, against Ricky Template, who's been the at-large member. And at the last moment, people are familiar with a guy named Frankie Hires jumped into the race. But people have been seeing this as Template versus Van Vranken. In the other district, you have Scott Walker, who's the incumbent at-large member. There he is. And he's running against another example of a district council member who is term limited in Dominic Impastato. Curiously, 2 people in these races, Scott Walker and Jennifer Van Vranken, are former TV news people.
Right.
In fact, it used to be Jennifer Van Vranken was one of the people at this table on the show.
That's right.
When she was at Channel 8. And Scott Walker, I believe, was with Channel 6. So being on TV kind of helps a little bit with the profile. So I think those are going to be the really 2 interesting races.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a lot of signs out and about. You can definitely see big competition.
Yeah, there is one race I would add to the radar. Former State Senator Derek Shepherd, who was a former felon, was reelected to the school board. He has rehabbed his image in the community and is already running again for the parish council against Byron Lee. And look, I view this as a big political power grab by Derek Shepherd, because he's also getting involved in a state senate race in the area where Rodney Lyons, the incumbent, is facing the challenge from Thomas Mackey Jr., who may find some help from Derek Shepherd and his friends in this cycle. So there's a lot of politics, a lot of things moving around in Jefferson Parish. It has my attention.
Now, Derek Shepherd had been in government before, in politics
He was a state senator.
He was a
in
state
Baton
senator.
Rouge. That's right.
Okay.
And Byron Lee is not affected by term limitations like 2 of his colleagues are, and so and so he's still in the race, yeah.
Yeah. All right, and let us all remind you too, because I forgot to do this right after we spoke to Jeremy about the governor's race, but there is going to be a debate that you will be able to catch here on WYES, and it's going to be carried by LPB is actually going to be hosting the debate, and WYES will broadcast this governor's debate on September 28th at 7 p.m. And so this is one you're definitely going to want to see. We'll be reminding you about it, September 28th at 7 p.m. All right, guys, let's now move on over to Ben, because the superintendent, NOPD superintendent search keeps on going.
It's moving quite slowly.
Yeah.
So the mayor received her recommendations from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. There were 3 finalists, but she didn't want to schedule the interviews with those finalists until she reached out to a 4th who had withdrawn after going through this series of assessments by the IACP. She wanted to see if he would be interested, so she announced this week that yes, in fact, he is interested, and she will at some point be scheduling an interview with him as well as the other 3. But when those interviews happen, we don't know yet.
We don't. I mean, what is the timeline on this whole thing?
Well, you know, we know that they envisioned it to be complete with a chief by the end of June based on the contract with IACP. But since then, the mayor has just simply said, I'm taking my time. I'm not going to be boxed in. I need to do my due diligence. So that's what she says she's doing, but we don't have any kind of end in sight. They did have an interesting comment in one of the press releases that said this could take another several months, so I don't even know what that's going to mean. So
I wonder if this was of concern to Woodfork, that all of a sudden the mayor says, hey, there's somebody we left out I want to talk to.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I know that Michelle Woodfork wants the job. She said it in interviews. But you know, I don't know how I would interpret this if I were her or not. You know, it's kind of hard to tell what the mayor's thinking, if she has a favorite or not.
Okay, and so we don't know yet when she will talk to this gentleman. And
Nope.
And any idea of what his feelings are about dropping out and then being told, come
She
on
said
back?
that he didn't give her a reason. I haven't been able to reach him, so we'll see.
Well,
All
if you'd have read the coverage at the time, I think you'd have gotten the feeling he didn't have a chance, you know, at that point. But then all of a sudden, you know, maybe talking to the mayor is got that feeling.
Well, we'll see. It keeps on going, as we said.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, Ben. Another thing that keeps on going, unfortunately, is worry about hurricanes. And there's been a change in the predictions.
Oh yeah, it's a change in the long-term forecast that if anybody believes these, I've got lots of other things I can sell you for a lot more money that might be more useful to you. NOAA on Thursday basically said that it was moving from a less than or normal number of storms to a bit more than normal, of 14 to 21 named storms, 5 to 12 hurricanes, and 2 to 5 that may be major hurricanes, category 3 or above. But you know, what that means is still real unclear because of things that we're facing every day right now, which is the heat. There's this huge heat dome that's been over the Gulf of Mexico and over our area that has basically eliminated the chance of any hurricane occurring close to us. But the thing to remember is, number one, it only takes one, as we know only too well, and number two, August 29th is a really great day for hurricanes for South Louisiana, and we're still several weeks away from that. So things may change around for that. The key things that they see as increasing the risk are literally record heat in the Atlantic Ocean. Sea surface temperatures are at record warmth. And that overwhelms the potential effects of El Nino, warmer than normal water in the eastern Pacific Ocean, from causing wind shear that would break up storms before they can become tropical systems. So that's what's probably going to take over, but when things start, we're still a couple of weeks away from the height of the season.
Do you remember, and I hate to put you on the spot, but the year of Katrina, how far were we up in the alphabet, like around this time?
Well, Katrina was K, and I know, I guess, I think there was
Cindy.
Cindy was.
There was Cindy. That was in July.
That was in July. So it moved fairly quickly, but the conditions were at least a bit different in terms of the way things looked out in the Atlantic and the Gulf than what they do right now. We're still in this portion of the season where dry wind off of the African coast is basically drying up the atmosphere, and it's lasting a little bit longer than people thought.
Do we have the Sahara dust coming over us still too?
The Sahara dust is actually that dry wind. They call it Sahara dust, but the important thing of it is not the dust; it's the dryness, of the material that's in there.
And the water temperatures right now, and the situation that we are experiencing. I mean, this is unique. Have we ever
really
experienced
dangerous.
it like that?
I have not seen it like this, and there are two major problems for us. One is that just on the Louisiana Gulf Coast, this week we've had temperatures of 90 degrees in the water.
In the water?
Yeah.
And then the loop current, that portion of the Gulf Stream that breaks off every year and a half, is sitting off of our coast. And that's 200 feet deeper of much warmer water. And that's not good. That has been there each time we've had a major hurricane. It's crossed the loop current. And that causes rapid intensification.
Okay, now he's officially scared me. Okay, but thank you, Mark, for the information. We do need to know this, you know.
Yeah, so the heat is good for us right now.
Okay, all right. We'll keep thinking of that when we're sweating outside. All right, time for other stories real quick. E?
Big story here, something everybody missed in the election. A small claims court, First City Court, Section B, qualifying yesterday. There was no incumbent. One guy signed up, an attorney named Elroy James, so he's in effect elected. Elroy James is also the president of Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club. And so Elroy James, between Zulu and First City Court, only guy presides over two courts.
Indeed he does. Okay, over to you, Jeremy.
Politics. I cover politics every day, but Sunday morning I'm taking my son, Keaton, love you, buddy. We're going fishing. We're going to fish the lake, and in honor of Mark, I'm going to take an extra moment to appreciate the dolphins as they try to steal our fish.
Mark, over to you.
Yeah, with mid-Barataria construction beginning, there will be a shift in focus to mid-Breton Sound and the potential mid-Breton sediment diversion, which is probably a year or two away in terms of its permitting. So we'll have to see whether or not it moves forward as quickly as this one has.
All right, Ben?
Next week, we should get some news on the Six Flags project. Almost 2 years after the Cantrell administration chose a development group, we should learn whether or not they will actually be able to get on the property and start working on it.
Okay, doke. We'll look for that. Thanks, guys, for being here, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES Television.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.